Good evening, friends, and welcome to Mirror Valley. Human beings are inherently social creatures. Our desire for communion with others is so great that a young child deprived of human touch will eventually wither and die. In adulthood, one can survive such isolation physically. One's sanity, however, is another story altogether. Tonight, we find out what happens when one man continually finds himself in the company of only his own mind. The time is at hand once more. Turn off the lights, lock your doors, and join me as we take a look at another twisted reflection.
The Lighthouse Keeper. The life of a lighthouse keeper is a lonely one. Day after day, week after week, night after night, isolated on a tiny little island, in a tiny little room. Once, most lighthouse keepers worked alone, but the human mind is a strange thing. It craves human interaction. Left without adequate stimulation, it doesn't take long for its thought processes to become corrupted. I spent the better part of 10 years alone, with nothing but my own thoughts for company, working the lighthouse that, for many years, I have called my home. Those 10 years were not easy, at least not at first, but I adapted. I adjusted, and I came to relish my solitude on this piece of rock perched in the angry waters. So by the time the company decided they would no longer allow lighthouses to be staffed by solitary individuals, I was less than eager to welcome a companion into my home. But the choice was not mine to make, so I could do nothing but relent and make my best efforts to welcome a partner into my little world. The intention was to never leave a man alone, with only his thoughts in such a desolate and unforgiving environment. The company tried its best, and I saw a parade of various young men join me on the island as the years passed. But they never worked out. They simply weren't suited to the life as I was. And so it was that, once again, as had happened several times before, I found myself, due to unforeseen circumstances, alone with the lighthouse, awaiting the arrival of my latest companion. He arrived without fanfare, and seemed a good, hard-working lad, but I kept my eye on him. Given the experiences I'd had with the other young men who'd set foot on my island, I was careful to watch him very closely. At first, things progressed normally, as they always would. I showed him his new quarters, schooled him in the running and maintenance of the lighthouse light, informed him of the share of duties which he was to undertake. He listened carefully and acknowledged my orders without complaint, but I suspected there was something he was keeping to himself. Perhaps simply the typical young man's resentment at having to take orders from a superior. Perhaps, as was always the case, things went well enough at first. Any mistakes or oversights were easily chalked up to the young lad's inexperience, and the laziness and lack of attention to detail those from his generation predictably displayed. He was but one of many who had arrived on this island, intent on sharing my work. They always arrived with a grim determination in their eyes, but in short order, one after another. They left little more on the island than a fading memory of their presence, and I, time after time, despite company policy to the contrary, would find myself alone due to unforeseen and unavoidable circumstances. It didn't take long until I began to suspect some of the same signs of unrest in the boy. I watched him even more closely, worked him harder to keep his mind occupied and exhausted. The lighthouse keeper's isolated life pulls away at your sanity if you let it. Slowly, gradually, like the ocean waves pulling the sand from a lonely shore into its depths, one grain at a time. By the time you realize how much has been lost, it's too late. Soon, I became convinced the lad was beginning to suffer from the same malady as all the others. I saw the familiar, off-kilter twinkle arrive in his eyes.
We will return to our story in just a moment. But first,
enjoying the show? Please help us out and like this video, and subscribe to the Mirror Valley YouTube channel. Click the bell to be notified of new videos almost every week. And be sure to visit our website, mirrorvalley.com, for new episodes, the latest news, and behind-the-scenes information. That's mirrorvalley.com.
And now, the conclusion of tonight's story.
Soon, I became convinced the lad was beginning to suffer from the same malady as all the others. I saw the familiar, off-kilter twinkle arrive in his eyes. I began to receive visions in my sleep, premonitions of what the boy would become as the island began to have its way with him. I said nothing of these discoveries, but with every passing hour, the dark shadow of the island crept closer to him, lingering at his shoulder, breathing in his air as he moaned in fitful sleep. I tried to keep him busy, to steer him clear from the calamity I knew he was, like all the others, careening directly toward. But in the end, it was of no use. The island used him up, until he was little more than a shell of a human being, until I had no choice but to act, not just to protect myself and, of course, my island, but to show mercy to the young lad, to relieve him of his duties and send him away from the island once and for all, lest its dark mania grab hold of his soul forever. As much as they all wanted to keep their positions here, one after another, they made it clear that they lacked the constitution to weather such a desolate existence. I did what I had to get them away from the island, once and for all, before it consumed their very souls. And so it is that, once again, as has happened several times before, I find myself alone on the island, staring out to sea, awaiting the arrival of my latest companion, on my own once again, due to unforeseen circumstances.
And so our time together comes to an end once more. Our paths will cross again soon. Until then, keep your eyes open, your mind sharp, and remember, what you see in the mirror is not always what it appears to be. Until next time, good night, friends.